Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Amy Barickman. Born in Michigan, raised in Iowa, Amy graduated from the University of Kansas with a degree in fine arts, only wishing it was with an emphasis in textiles versus glassblowing. Always drawn to boutique fashion as well as upcycling and vintage, vintage made modern has been a theme of many of the books and patterns she produced over the more than 30 years of product development with a brand she founded in 1990, Indygo Junction. She's the author of the award-winning book Vintage Notions, an inspirational guide to needlework, cooking, sewing, fashion, and fun. Most recently, her passion for vintage and upcycling led her to create Treasured Threadz with her manufacturing and distribution partner, Colonial Patterns. Her latest project, a gift book, Love You to Pieces, is a combination of her passion for collecting quilts and sharing handmade treasures, along with the history behind them. She's coming full circle with her new project, a book based on her collection of quilts and stuffed bears and dolls. She'll also be introducing a collection of doll and bear patterns to companion the book, hoping to add machine embroidery and other products that will inspire the sewing and quilting community. Additionally, she's working with Colonial Patterns on a new line of embroidery products under ABC Amy Barickman Creative. Amy currently spends most of the year in Kansas City, though she enjoys her family home in Northwest Michigan as well. Her husband is a 6th grade teacher, and they have 2 kids who both graduated college and are working in Kansas City. Amy Barickman, welcome to So and So.
Thanks so much for having me, Meg.
It's wonderful to have you on this episode. We need to thank Pam Mashey for the introduction, and we have a lot to talk to you about today. And I'm going to jump right in and say, how did you learn to sew, and who inspired you?
Well, as many people out there, my mother taught me to sew. My grandmother also inspired me. My mom was a home ec teacher, and so she taught me to sew originally. She was also my, Girl Scout troop leader, and we did the wrap skirt as one
Mm-hmm.
of our early projects in the troop. And from then on, I watched over her at her sewing machine, sewing and followed along with different businesses along the way that she exposed me to at a young age. So I was very fortunate to have a incredibly talented mom, and she loved sewing garments as well as she had a little business where she dressed antique dolls and repaired them for people when I was young. So that was another part of my childhood.
So, a couple questions. First of all, do you remember the first thing you ever made?
I would say it was that wrap skirt
Okay.
was the first project. And then I would say I probably took a little break from sewing, but circled back to it in my middle school years, where we all had, and I had a wonderful home ec teacher in my middle school years, and that inspired me into my high school years to continue sewing. Probably that was the highest level of my time sewing, was in high school, when I had launched a little business that it had been based on one of my mom's businesses growing up.
Now, you had mentioned your mom's business, and it really influenced you quite deeply. You mentioned you started a business because of it. Would you tell us about that influence that business had, your mom's business, and then the business you started?
Sure, sure. So when I was young, I'd mentioned the doll dressing business that my mom had. that was while we were kids and she stayed at home. And eventually she actually partnered with one of her girlfriends, Peggy, and they started a business called Bertha's Bed. And that was actually using cutter quilts, damaged quilts and such to create garments, jackets, vests, and even create teddy bears out of old quilts. And so that was probably the first recollection of mine with her, learning about how she sold and, selling wholesale to shops and things like that. And that was more in my elementary and middle school years. And then she eventually had an opportunity to that bear making got going, and she did that independently and was able to partner with a local retailer and open a craft shop within a larger little store. And that was where she really got into making and teaching people how to make teddy bears.
Hmm.
um, and she did other crafts too, embroidery, all sorts of popular, 1980s stenciling was another big craft that she focused on with her shop. So when I saw her, profiting from making these teddy bears and teaching people to do it, I myself thought, okay, there's an opportunity. I can do that. So I started making bears and selling them. I loved going to the Goodwill store in downtown Des Moines and, finding wonderful old coats or even, a wool jacket with a mink stole. And so that was really when I started upcycling, was with this little business I had in high school. And that led me to really explore pattern making and learn all of the ins and outs of, how to sell to a shop and what net 30 was and all of the basics of business. And watching my mom in her store work with her customers was a regular activity of mine. So from a young age, I was really immersed in the entrepreneurial lifestyle, I would say.
So, your mom owning a local business has made supporting local businesses pretty important to you. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. So my mom eventually moved her store to a little Main Street area called Valley Junction in West Des Moines, Iowa. And she at times she owned two stores at one point, where she had her gift store and then and craft store, but then she also opened up a dedicated quilt shop. So I really realized, seeing how hard she worked and, how supportive, her creative community was around her shops. It just has always influenced me to know the value of the bricks and mortar um, establishments, especially in our creative space, because they also build community. And she had a wonderful, just wonderful group of employees in her store that taught classes and were always just the most wonderful people. And that just drew, a wonderful, wonderful customers. So it was really, and it was a special time in, retail before we had the internet where
Mhm.
everybody was shopping online. So that's why I definitely love to, when I have new products, I like to try to encourage customers to look at their local shop first and foremost and try to, order or purchase locally.
Vintage is a fascination of yours, and I'm curious, why is that?
Well, I think it came again from my mother and grandmother. I actually came across a little picture of my when I was a baby, and my dad took it, and my mom was standing. We were both wearing matching little gingham out. I mean, matching gingham outfits and standing in front of an antique shop, and the
Hmm.
sign was above. So from both my parents and my grandparents on both sides had a love of antiques. And so, from a child, I look at pictures, and my mom, had quilts hanging on the wall, kind of stretched quilt tops in a contemporary style in our home. Um, my grandma loved, she lived in Arizona and loved the Indian culture and
Mm.
Native American. I had a definite passion for that art from a young age because I spent so much time in Arizona with my visiting my grandparents. So, I think it's just in my blood. And I love collecting. I love finding treasures and I feel like, there's so much amazing design in our past history, surface design, textiles, and much of that was made before computers, so it just has a different aesthetic than what we see now. And so I'm really drawn to that, and I love to share it with others, collect it. And I actually really went deep with that when I launched my Vintage Modern Makers courses online,
Hmm.
and those share the history and techniques of certain textiles and notions like pearl buttons or feet sacks, yo-yos. So that was a fun chance for me to share that love of vintage.
You're busy. You do. I guess that's just an obvious comment, but right now you're working with Colonial Patterns on a new line of embroidery products, and it's under the ABC Amy Barickman Creative banner. What will these products be?
Well, again, they will be inspired by my vintage collection, but definitely with a modern twist. Um, they will include a collection of flour sack towels, and these I have curated into a color, palette that I think will be very um, user friendly, lots of wonderful colors to work with. And then there'll also be a series of hand embroidery designs, both, there's the new product, Stick and Stitch, where you can. It allows you to do hand embroidery on darker colors versus the traditional iron-on transfer for embroidery and Colonial Patterns. A lot of people don't realize this, but that company manufactured all the Aunt Martha's
Mm.
hot transfer patterns that have been, around for over 70 years in our industry. And so this company is local, and we were able to partner on this new line. So, and I'm looking at these towels as almost like a fabric line because I'm hoping to create a variety of inspiring projects and for people where they'll be able to sew with these colored towels
Hmm.
and create all sorts of gifts and even fashion. We're working on some apparel designs with these.
And when will those be available?
They will be available in this summer, so
Okay.
they're just about ready for release. And the embroidery collection we're doing is really fun. We're calling it Jolly Santa, and so it's a series of hand embroidery projects that include, you know, everything from cross stitched words that you can mix with, all of the wonderful motifs of the holidays and Christmas. So that to me was the holiday that almost everybody loves to create and decorate around Christmas. So we started there.
Amy, you often talk about your excitement about the new generation of makers, their fresh perspective, their enthusiasm for creativity and craft. And I'm going to quote you here. It's a true joy to see modern creative women referencing vintage style and techniques in their contemporary creations. Would you give us some examples of the work that excites you?
Well, there are several things happening that excite me out there. I would say, I'll start with Denise Schmidt is a friend of mine, and she introduced the world to modern quilting. And I recently we visited together at QuiltCon, and then she was in Kansas City at an event. And I love her perspective and her style, and I think she's inspired so many. And then she also had a wonderful friend, Blair of Wisecraft Handmade, and Blair has taken the technique of chicken scratch and stitching on gingham, which if anybody's been in an antique mall and seen an apron with a gingham apron with cross stitch on it, that's what I'm
Hmm.
referring to.
Hmm.
Well, Blair has done some amazing new new perspectives on that technique. And then I think too, you see, as I look at my son and my daughter, I see them really interested in thrifting and upcycling. And when we look online at all of the garments being made out of, whether it be a terry cloth towel from the 1960s that's turned into this darling little, top, or what we've done over the years with Indygo Junction. We had so many patterns for upcycling, but I feel like there's just a really exciting movement in that direction, and it's it's really inspiring to see young people wanting to learn to sew, and really be sensitive to sustainability and taking good care of our earth.
You mentioned Indigo Junction. That was your first company that you started in 1990. What does the name mean? Where did that come from?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. I realized at when I was getting started, I wasn't sure really what I wanted the business to be. I knew that my launching would be taking some of my own patterns from making bears and such in my little business in high school. And then I also was able to license some of the designs that some of my mom's creators in her store had designed and published. But I also really love the idea of working with artists to market and promote their work. So I thought if I left my name of the business a little more generic, it could evolve in a lot of different directions.
Hmm.
And I would say that Junction came from my mom's, where her store was, Valley Junction. And
Hmm.
I liked the idea a junction is a meeting place. And then Indigo, I always loved the color indigo, and then I decided, well, I'll spell it a little differently just to set myself apart. So it really served me well over all those years, because it could mean different types of crafts and things that we were making. It wasn't specific to, you know, Amy's doll patterns or
Hmm.
something of that nature.
In addition to everything you do, you call yourself an historian. Why is that?
Well, that really comes back to my love of vintage art, and design, and my collecting of a very extensive archive of sewing and quilting books and needle art catalogs. I have just an immense archive of content. And that has, I've educated myself over the years about the various publications and artists and entrepreneurs that have been part of our world of sewing and quilting. But really, my book, Vintage Notions, is what has validated in my mind me as being able to use the term historian when I talk about myself.
Hmm.
So, and that book was that was quite a crossroads in my journey in business, and I'm still spend a lot of time referring to the content from that book and bringing some of that creative design forward in new products.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the research you did. In looking into sewing history, you were led to discover your muse, who is Mary Brooks Picken, the founder of the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Science, and she was a fashion and sewing authority in the early 20th century. Would you tell us about her and why she became so important to you?
Yes, Mary was just an incredible woman who had such an influence on in her almost mid she was really quite an influence through the 1980s, so through the mid 20th century. She actually wrote the Singer Sewing Book, and so that book sold over 8 million copies and was, I think it was translated into 12 different languages. So finding her work, what I learned originally was that her, number one, she was born in Kansas and educated in Kansas City, my town. So I was, that was thrilling to think, I could drive downtown and I was walking on the same streets that she did during her tenure at the American College of Dressmaking. So she started with that school. She eventually was recruited out east to found the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences, which was a institution based on correspondence education. So they would teach through courses that were mailed, and this grew into 400,000, mainly women, were educated all over the world through this institution. And so the way I originally discovered Mary Brooks Picken was I actually found a newsletter called Inspiration that the Women's Institute published. And I read one of the essays in this little newsletter. And it was just delightful and compelling. And the author was Mary Brooks Picken. So I started digging deeper and discovered just the magnitude of her impact on our creative, sewing world. The school also had a course track for cookery. So it was sewing, millinery, and cookery, and mainly dressmaking. But the philosophy was leaning into creativity for living a contented life. And there were so many stories, testimonials from the students that, I was just compelled to resurface this story. And that's when I decided to publish Vintage Notions, and have been, continuing to research and honor Mary and her story as much as I can.
And I want to underscore something that you said in passing. She taught more than 400,000 women through the mail.
That is correct.
That,
Yeah.
those are internet numbers, let alone
Well,
through the mail. So that's amazing.
yeah. Yeah. It is kind of come full circle with the way we learn today.
Hmm.
And and the other thing that's come full circle is, the mend and make do philosophy of that era in the early 1900s. Every little scrap was had a purpose potentially. So I know, when I see, particularly there's one and this book has 12 patterns in it too. So each chapter has a sewing pattern. And the January chapter is taking a man's shirt and turning it into an apron. Um, so when I saw Mary so dedicated to, recycling and upcycling fabric, that was a whole nother connection that I made to the content and the value.
It's interesting. Mend and make do is the precursor to thrifting, upcycling. It's always been here. It just looks a little bit different.
Yes, it definitely is something that I think it's just there's so many different on so many different levels. It can be such a wonderful, activity and hobby, whether it be, just the thrill of the hunt and finding
Mhm.
that, beautiful Ralph Lauren gingham shirt that you can then sew into an apron or another project. And I have actually, that brings to mind a friend of mine. I recently, we did a collaborative YouTube video on my anytime topper pattern. So that pattern I released a few years ago. You can buy it as a PDF or it's available in print too in local shops. But Karen of Sully's Upcycled, who's here locally in Kansas City, she and I had a great time doing a little collab and video where she took that pattern and made it. We even found fun floral bed sheets from the you know 60s or 70s, and she stitched that up into like a beach cover up that my daughter, who's in her 20s, just loved. And so Karen is really dedicated to upcycling, and I'm hoping we're going to do some more collaborative work here in the next year or two, so stay tuned for that.
Amy, what inspires you?
Well, definitely, as we've discussed, vintage. Um, Whenever I need a break, or if I've had a really, I have a big to-do list for myself, I'll reward myself after, maybe with a trip up to my one of my favorite antique venues or vintage venues. And I also, nature is a huge part of what inspires me. I do a lot of, particularly when I'm up in Michigan. I do a lot of photography. I love to get out on my kayak and photograph loons. um,
Mhm.
and I find so much in nature can be, design wise, can be applied in fabric design, embroidery design, whether it be, the pattern in a fall leaf or I love to collect rocks from the beach and create with those. But photography is a big part of my enjoyment when it comes to nature, and that inspires me in a big way.
Now, you've created quite a community. Would you talk about your connection to this community and what it means to you?
Well, it's I just want to say that I am so grateful to be a part of to be have launched into a business that offered such wonderful people as a community. When I think about, the industry partners that I've met over the years that have supported me in my business, and the manufacturers. I've worked with Clover Needlecraft. I've worked with ThermoWeb, and they all are a wonderful community. I think of Aliso, the iron company. I demo for them a lot at shows. And their community, they've introduced me to their people that follow them, which is wonderful. And then I think too about um, all my years going to Quilt Festival in Houston and meeting, the consumers are people that, buy our products and enjoy the creative, designs that we offer. And through the years, once social media or we were offered a new way to connect, I've been very, very fortunate to have people believe in my ideas and follow along with me. I have a newsletter that I've had going for probably over 15 years that I send out almost every Saturday. So I love when people sign up for my newsletter, and that can allow them to learn more about different activities, whether we're doing something on the Facebook group that I have, or, maybe I'm at an event, coming up. Maybe I talk about, the Kansas City Regional Quilt Festival, which happens every other year here in Kansas City. It's a wonderful show. So I love to, share information with the community, and appreciate so much people taking the time to follow along, and you know because I know everyone is so busy these days. So and just like you, Meg, just the Bernina community bringing me on.
Hmm.
It's all about us rising the tide together and really sharing our love of sewing and quilting with others, um, and bringing people together around that passion.
Indeed. So you and I have been in touch for a while, and you've been working on a new project you have. So we're going to do a lightning round question here. So, new book, landing page, launch party, go.
Well, Love You to Pieces is the new book, and it is based on my vintage quilt collection, along with the handmade collection I have of characters. Think sock monkeys, yo yo clowns, teddy bears, handmade dolls. I am planning to do a big launch with this book, and that'll be at a landing page, amybarickman.com/, love you to pieces. And we're going to do giveaways. I'm going to share behind the scenes. And this book will be coming out in later this summer, early fall. So I just want to, share it with everyone and give you a chance to learn more about these vintage quilts, and really it seems everyone in my mind has a connection to a quilt. This is a gift book, so it goes beyond just our community. It's a gift. It's a book that I hope brings even more attention to sewing, quilting, handmade, and I'm really, really excited about it. So I'd love it if everyone would join the launch party, or if you're listening to this later, the page will be updated with a campaign. We're planning a Kickstarter campaign for this book, so I'm really looking forward to sharing this.
A lot to look forward to. And speaking of that, what's next for you and what's your dream?
Well, I feel, Meg, like I've really hit it with this Love You to Pieces book as far as what I want to do going forward. It's allowed me to, share my collection and inspire with curating, vintage treasures that I hope others will enjoy. So my hope is, or my dream is, that I continue to build on this brand, or this book, and introduce it, grow it into a series potentially, and also be able to travel the country and share the book through whether I'm doing lectures or shows. So I'm really looking forward to diving deep into this story of handmade. And I think I'll also be developing hopefully fabric around the book, and other handmade DIY projects, kits, patterns. So that's really where I want to focus going forward.
Now, in our conversation today, we covered myriad things. Is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
I think you hit just about everything. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and it's a thrill for me to be able to share this new project with your community, Meg. So thank you so much for making this schedule work out for us.
Oh, absolutely. It has just been wonderful to talk to you today. And as our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My email is amy@amybarickman.com. If they have any specific questions or interested in learning more about, my book launch and plans. And then, I'd love for people to hop over to amybarickman.com and join my newsletter. If you're interested in the book, check out the launch page, the party we're going to have. And yeah, that would be wonderful. There's different ways, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I have a YouTube channel, so there's a myriad of ways to connect.
That's great. Amy, thank you again.
Thank you, Meg. This was just a lot of fun.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom a passion became a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.